When my son Greg invited me to Thanksgiving dinner, after months of silence, I thought our relationship was finally healing. I had no idea he'd already posted photos of their complete family dinner while I stood waiting at Minneapolis airport, wondering where my ride was. What happened next, involving my bank accounts, my lawyer, and a granddaughter who actually loved me, would teach Greg that some mistakes cost more than just hurt feelings. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now let's dive into today's story. The call came on a Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving, which was unusual because Greg only called for 3 reasons: birthdays, when he needed money, or when something was seriously wrong. At 72, Margaret had learned to recognize the patterns in her son's life, even when she wished those patterns were different. "Mom, the kids were asking about you." Greg's voice carried that familiar tone of someone making an effort that didn't come naturally. "Everyone will be together this year. Malene's sister is flying in from Portland, and even Emma's coming from college. It wouldn't feel right without you." Those last words hit Margaret somewhere deep in her chest. It wouldn't feel right without you. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said she was needed, truly needed, not just convenient or available. The invitation felt like water after a long drought, and she found herself agreeing before her practical mind could object. "I'll book a flight," she heard herself saying, already calculating the cost against her Christmas budget. "What time should I arrive?" "Thursday morning would be perfect," Greg replied, his voice already distracted by something else. "Malene will text you the details." "The kids are so excited, Mum. It's going to be great." After hanging up, Margaret sat in her quiet kitchen, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine excitement. She had planned to spend Thanksgiving alone, as usual, roasting a small chicken and watching old movies. Instead, she would be with family, watching her grandchildren laugh, maybe playing chess with Emma like they used to. She booked the flight that evening, paying extra for legroom because her arthritis made coach seats unbearable. She even splurged on a non-stop flight, reasoning that if she was going to do this, she might as well do it right. The ticket cost more than she usually spent on groceries in a month, but Greg hadn't offered to help with the expense, and she didn't want to start their reunion by asking for money. The next morning, Margaret walked through Target with the energy of someone half her age, selecting gifts for Elliot and Ruby. Books for both children, the kind with beautiful illustrations that would last long after the toys were broken. Dark chocolate truffles for the adults, wrapped in elegant gold foil. For herself, she chose a navy blue cardigan, soft and well-made, the kind of sweater that said she belonged in family photos. She packed 3 days early, checking the Minneapolis weather forecast twice, and laying out her clothes with the care of someone preparing for an important job interview. The good shoes with the tiny heel, the ones that made her feel like the kind of woman people invited places. The silver earrings Emma had admired last Christmas. Everything chosen to help her fit into the picture she hoped they wanted her in. Margaret didn't tell her bridge group about the trip. Experience had taught her that speaking hopes aloud too early could somehow jinx them, and this invitation felt too precious to risk. Thursday morning, she woke before her alarm, dressed carefully, and took a taxi to the airport. During the flight, she practiced conversations in her head, imagining Emma showing her around campus via video chat, Ruby demonstrating her latest art project, Elliot explaining his soccer strategy, simple moments that would prove she belonged in their lives as more than an obligation. The plane touched down at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport at 3:10 p.m., exactly on time. Margaret walked through the terminal with her small rolling suitcase, her purse containing the wrapped gifts, looking for Greg's familiar face or Malene's perfectly styled hair. Gate 3A was busy with Thanksgiving travelers, families reuniting with squeals of joy and tight hugs that made Margaret's chest ache with anticipation. She stood near the designated pickup area, watching other grandmothers being swept into embraces by excited grandchildren. After 20 minutes, she checked her phone and reread Maline's text. "We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you." Her own response, sent that morning, remained unanswered. "Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone." 30 minutes passed. Then 40. Margaret tried calling Greg, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried Maline with the same result. Other passengers from her flight had long since departed with their families, leaving her increasingly alone in the bustling terminal. At 4:02 p.m., her phone buzzed with a social media notification. Margaret opened the app reluctantly, more out of distraction than interest, and saw a photo that stopped her heart mid-beat. Greg, Maline, Elliot, and Ruby crowded around a beautifully set dining table, steam rising from a golden turkey, homemade pies visible in the background. Everyone was smiling, dressed in their Thanksgiving best, looking like the perfect family gathered for the perfect holiday meal. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts, happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." Margaret stared at the photo, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The timestamp showed it had been posted 20 minutes ago, while she stood waiting for them to pick her up. The table was set for exactly 4 people. There was no empty chair, no extra place setting, no indication that anyone else was expected. The realization hit her like a physical blow. There had been no mistake about pickup times or traffic delays. There was no space for her at that table because there had never been intended to be space for her at that table. Margaret stood in the middle of Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, holding her phone with shaking hands, finally understanding that she had spent her Christmas money to fly to a family dinner that had never included her. The invitation, the excitement in Greg's voice, the promise that it wouldn't feel right without you, all of it had been a lie, or at best, a moment of guilt that had been quickly forgotten. She didn't cry. Instead, she turned around, put on her coat, and started walking toward the exit. She wouldn't wait for them to remember her, wouldn't call to ask for explanations, wouldn't make herself smaller to accommodate their thoughtlessness. For the first time in years, Margaret felt something stronger than hurt. She felt angry, and the anger felt clean and powerful. As she walked past the reuniting families, she noticed details she had missed before. A woman about her age, embracing her daughter-in-law with genuine warmth. A grandfather swinging a toddler into the air while the child shrieked with delight. These people weren't obligations or afterthoughts. They were treasured, expected, integral parts of their families' celebrations. Margaret walked out of the terminal and kept walking, her good shoes clicking against the pavement, her small suitcase rolling behind her. She had no destination in mind, but movement felt better than standing still. The Minneapolis air was crisp and clean, and for the first time all day, she could breathe deeply. About half a mile from the airport, she spotted Tina's Diner, a squat building with a flickering neon sign and windows fogged with warmth. Paper turkeys decorated the glass, and through the condensation, she could see the yellow glow of interior lights. It looked like exactly the kind of place where someone could sit quietly and think. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes, greeted her with genuine warmth. "Happy Thanksgiving, hun. Just you today?" "Just me," Margaret replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Well, you picked the right place. We've got the best pumpkin pie in Minneapolis, and today feels like a pie kind of day." Margaret ordered pie and tea, then settled into a corner booth where she could think. The pie was extraordinary, rich, perfectly spiced, with a crust that flaked at the touch of her fork. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, realizing that for once she hadn't made the dessert for someone else's approval. This pie was just for her, and it tasted like freedom. When the waitress brought the check, she winked and asked, "Another slice to go?" "That might be the best decision I make all day," Margaret replied, and they both laughed. The waitress wrapped up a second slice with care. Sometimes the holidays don't go the way we plan, but that doesn't mean they can't still be good. Margaret found a budget motel called the Valley Inn, a square, low-slung building with beige paint and a vending machine humming in the parking lot. Room 114 was basic but clean, with a working heater and surprisingly good water pressure. She sat on the bed and finally checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Greg, 2 from Malene, and a single text message. "Mom, where are you?" No apology, no explanation, just confusion at her absence. Margaret stared at the message for a long time, then put her phone face down on the nightstand without responding. Instead, she took out a small notebook she always carried and wrote, "I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table." The words felt revolutionary, like stepping into cold water, shocking but clean. For years, she had accepted last-minute invitations, endured forgotten birthdays, answered calls only when Greg needed something. She had convinced herself that love meant being available, being grateful for whatever attention they offered, being understanding when they offered none. But sitting in that plain motel room, eating excellent pie and drinking mediocre tea, Margaret realized she had been settling for crumbs while convincing herself she was getting a meal. Her phone buzzed again at 7:12 a.m. with a text from Greg. "Sorry about confusion with pickup yesterday. Thought your flight was tomorrow. What hotel are you at?" No explanation for the photo. No acknowledgement of the dinner. No real apology. Just the assumption that his mistake could be easily fixed, that she would be grateful for his attention even after being discarded. Margaret didn't reply. Instead, she found a postal annex and wrote a letter to Emma, her 20-year-old granddaughter, who was Greg's daughter from his first marriage. "Dear Emma," she wrote, "this Thanksgiving didn't go as planned, but I found something in the quiet that I didn't expect. Room to remember who I am without waiting for someone else to say it first. I hope you know that you have always been the light in this family for me, the only one who calls just to talk, who remembers my birthday without prompting, who makes me feel like I matter." She sealed the letter and mailed it, feeling lighter with each step back to her rental car. At the airport, she booked a seat on the evening flight home. Same airline, same gate, but she felt like a different woman preparing to board. While waiting, she sat in a cafe and wrote in her notebook about things that had been unspoken too long. The flight attendant offered her usual smile and asked, "Heading home or leaving it?" "Both," Margaret replied, and the woman's understanding nod told her that sometimes that was the only honest answer. Margaret arrived home, to a house that smelled like lavender and old wood. She moved slowly through familiar rooms, then sat at her kitchen table and pulled out a drawer labeled with Greg and Emma's names. Greg's folder was thick with receipts, tuition payments she had covered, car insurance she had paid, a mortgage co-signing that had nearly bankrupted her, a preschool deposit that was never repaid. Emma's folder contained birthday cards, graduation photos, and thank you notes written in careful handwriting. Margaret closed both folders and wrote a plan in her notebook. The next morning, she arrived at her bank before it opened, wearing her oldest boots and that same navy cardigan. Her account manager, Natalie, had handled her finances for over a decade and knew about the regular transfers to Greg's accounts. "I need to suspend all automatic payments to family members," Margaret said, without preamble. "Greg's tuition payments, car insurance, the monthly supplements. Keep the charity donations, but stop everything else." "May I ask why?" Natalie asked gently. "I've already spent enough time explaining myself," Margaret replied. She also revoked Greg's power of attorney, a document she had signed years earlier when he convinced her it would be easier for him to handle certain affairs. At the time, it had seemed practical. Now, it felt like she had signed away her right to make decisions about her own life. That afternoon, she called Mr. Altman, her lawyer for over 30 years. "I want to make changes to my estate," she said. "Significant changes." The next morning, she sat in Mr. Altman's office and laid out her intentions with the clarity of someone who had thought through every detail. "Everything I own, every asset I wanted protected, and I wanted to go to Emma, only Emma." "What about Gregory and Malene?" Mr. Altman asked carefully. "They've had enough from me. More than enough." She wanted the trust airtight, with no loopholes, no backdoors. Emma would be the sole beneficiary and executor, with access for education, healthcare, housing, and emergencies. Margaret would retain full control while living. But after her death, Greg and Malene would receive nothing. "She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse," Margaret explained. Mr. Altman drafted the documents with his usual precision, and Margaret signed them with a steady hand. Afterward, she stopped at a flower shop and bought a small poinsettia for her kitchen table. She wanted something bright and alive in her space. Emma called that evening, her voice breathless and warm. "Grandma, I got your letter. I'm so sorry about Thanksgiving. That wasn't right, and I want you to know it didn't feel complete without you." For the first time since the airport, Margaret cried, but these were different tears. "That means more than you know, sweetheart. Can I come visit next weekend? I want to see you." Emma arrived on Saturday afternoon, rushing off the train to hug Margaret like she meant it. They played chess. Emma won one game, Margaret won another. They cooked together, watched old movies, and talked about everything except the elephant in the room until Sunday morning. "Your letter was honest," Emma said over breakfast. "I've been exhausted trying to pretend things are normal. Dad gets weird about money, and Malene makes everything about appearances. I never ignored you, Grandma. I need you to know that." "You don't have to pretend here," Margaret replied. "This is your safe place, always." For the first time in weeks, Margaret realized she wasn't angry anymore. She had her house, her tea, her granddaughter, and most importantly, she had herself back. A week later, Malene arrived unannounced, her hair perfectly styled, her smile professionally practiced. "We need to make things right," Malene began. "The whole Thanksgiving thing was a huge misunderstanding." "What about the photo?" Margaret asked directly. Malene's smile flickered. "What photo?" "The one you posted while I was waiting at the airport. Full house, full hearts. There were 4 place settings at that table, Malene. 4. The professional composure cracked slightly. "The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." "No," Margaret said calmly. "I just stopped filling in the silence for you. That's different." Malene tried several more approaches: guilt, manipulation, false concern, but Margaret remained unmoved. Finally, Malene's real purpose emerged. "What did you mean about deciding where the rest of it goes?" "Greg saw some paperwork from your lawyer. I imagine he's starting to suspect," Margaret replied. "He's worried," Malene said. "He should be. Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." When Greg called later that week, Margaret answered. "I saw the paperwork," he said without preamble. "The trust, the changes. What's this about?" "You mean the money," Margaret replied. "I mean the pattern, the forgetting, the late calls, the missing birthdays, the airport, the photo." "That wasn't intentional," Greg protested. "No, it was worse. It was convenient." She listed years of thoughtlessness, of taking her support for granted, while excluding her from the moments that mattered. Greg accused her of punishing them, but Margaret corrected him. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm releasing myself from obligations that only moved in one direction, from guilt I'd carried so long, I'd forgotten what lightness felt like." "We're family," Greg said desperately. "No, Greg, I was your family. You haven't been mine in a long time." After hanging up, Margaret sealed copies of all the legal documents in her fireproof box. She was finished explaining, finished asking, finished waiting. That evening, she cooked dinner for one, setting her table with care and attention. She had spent years being hurt quietly and consistently, accepting it because she thought endurance was a virtue. But endurance without respect wasn't virtue. It was just the cost of silence. She wrote a final letter to be attached to Emma's trust documents. This is not punishment. It's honesty. I've spent my life giving quietly and consistently, but love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. I chose the one person who saw me before I vanished. Margaret lit 2 candles at dinner because she was there, fully present in her own life for the first time in years. Outside, the December snow was beginning to fall, but inside, her house glowed with warmth and intention. She had learned that silence has value, that her seat at any table belonged to her alone, and that she didn't need permission to keep it. This Thanksgiving, the one she had given herself, tasted not of bitterness, but of freedom. The story Margaret had written for herself was finally her own. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayals. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.